Thanks for staying up later. Glen Campbell is with us tonight, and of course, that suggests Rhinestone Cowboy and Galveston and Wichita Lineman, and by the time I get to Phoenix, and Gentle on My Mind, and the variety show on CBS that was very popular. But if people think that's the whole story, they're in for a surprise, because the roster of people you've played with, either on the road or in studio sessions, is staggering, including Elvis. So let's start there. When did you first come into contact with Elvis?
In the late 50s, I was working at KOB in Albuquerque, New Mexico. We had a show called Noonday Roundup with Dick Bills and the Sandia Mountain Boys. Fair and Young came in to the show. Elvis didn't come in because it was the Fair and Young show. They were to Armory in Albuquerque. And it was a Fair and Young show featuring Elvis Presley. And Farron had went on last the first night of the tour. He said, from that day on, he went out and did his show, and then he introduced Elvis, and I could see why. And it was very, very dynamic, Bob. Elvis came out with the three pieces and just floored me. You know, just him and the three pieces, the bass, drums, and guitar. And it was awesome.
What was the difference between Elvis at what I would guess was his best, you know, late 50s, maybe into the early 60s? The difference between that and the Elvis that everyone parodies. If you see an Elvis impersonator, they're doing Elvis in Vegas in 1974. They're not doing the Elvis of 1958.
No, they're not doing the old Elvis. Elvis was so dynamic then. I mean, just his voice carried everything. It was rhythm, his phrasing. Yeah, I saw him in Vegas too. In fact, in March of '77, and that was right before he died in August of that year. God rest his soul. And it wasn't the same Elvis I saw in naturally that I saw in '56 or '7 in Albuquerque. And the whole show was different, you know. It was big-time showbiz with the big band and giving the scarves away. But it was very pure when I saw him in the late 50s.
How much of a sense of the power that he had over an audience did he have?
It was awesome. Elvis Presley. I worked on Viva Las Vegas, the soundtrack movie with him, playing guitar. And he could walk in a studio, and you knew he was in the room, even if you didn't know he came in the door. He had that much charisma, that much magnetism. It was awesome.
And he knew he had it.
Yeah. Well, he knew he had it, but he was kind of shy about it. You know, Elvis was a shy person. A lot of people don't know that. And everything he did on stage was never choreographed. Back then, it was all spontaneous. I think later on, it was more or less choreographed.
All right, so you played with Presley. You also played on Sinatra's Strangers in the Night.
Right.
It's a big hit in the mid-'60s.
Yeah, that was a thrill, I'll tell you. I'd always loved Sinatra. I mean, I grew up with Sinatra because we had a battery radio when I was a kid. My dad did, and whatever came on, and in the 40s I was a kid, and that was Sinatra's big era, actually. And I love Frank Sinatra, but to sit there and play on the session. We sat and ran the song for about, I guess, an hour, Strangers in the Night. And Sinatra came in and did three takes on it, I think, and Scooby-Dooby-Doo, and thanked everybody, and he was gone. It was just fascinating. See this capo?
Yeah.
That's what got me so much studio work. I'll show you what I did on Strangers in the Night, just for the heck of it. Now, you can play in sharp and flat keys. And I was the last guitar on in. There was 4 acoustic guitars. Nobody knew how to use a capo in L.A., but it was this, you know, strangers in the night, exchanging glances.
You know, this is very strange, you singing this song this way to me and making eye contact this way. And it's been a special experience for me.
We're in E flat, and you can't play it like that without a capo. And Ernie Friedman thought it was very unusual that I could play the ringing sounds and the minors and everything in sharp and flat keys, you know. It was funny. I got a lot of studio work from Ernie doing that.
You played on You've Lost That Lovin' Feelin', the Righteous Brothers, and another Phil Spector project, the Phil Spector Christmas album, which is still a classic.
Oh, the work with the Righteous Brothers, they were so great. In fact, and later on, I went out as their opening act after Gentle on My Mind came out. And it was great fun. They'd go out with me and a guitar and do 15 or 20 minutes, and then they'd have it in mostly colleges.
Yeah. So, you know, all things considered, I'd say that You've Lost That Lovin' Feelin', in my opinion, is one of the dozen or so best records of that era in rock and roll. It's a beautifully orchestrated record. It's got that, it was almost, I guess, the peak of Spector's vision, where he
Yeah.
made rock and roll sound like an opera.
Right, definitely.
You know, brought it all together and all the orchestration.
Yes, I would say so. And when Hall & Oates came out with You've Lost That Loving Feeling, I played them side by side, and there was quite a bit of difference there. That was, to me, probably the best record I played on, maybe with the exception of Bridge Over Troubled Waters. Those two hang real high on my list.
Another feather in your cap is Nat King Cole.
Oh, yeah.
Which song was that?
It was the album after Lazy, Hazy, Crazy Days of Summer. Nat always liked to warm up before he would do the sessions. He'd sit and play piano. There's Ray Brown on bass, Earl Palmer, I think, was drums, and I'd sit down get up next to Nat's piano stool and just play acoustic 12-string, because that's what I was playing rhythm on the sessions with, and they'd jam, you know, and it was great. It was a musician's camaraderie type of thing, like football players have a camaraderie, you know, that.
Sure.
It was so it was Nat. I looked at him more as a piano player, actually, but boy, you know, people don't realize what a great musician he was. I mean, boy, he was as good a jazz pianist as, you know, I mean, I put him up there with Earl Garner or Oscar Peterson or any of those guys.
So you're actually able to be something of a chameleon. You're at home in all these different forms. You did a whole jazz treatment, an album of Dylan songs done in a jazz style. I think Leon Russell was the keyboard man, right? I mean, people don't know this about you, that you can slip in and out of these various forms, and that some of the top people in the business think enough of your work that they want you in their sessions.
It was great fun. It was like going to Juilliard for 8 years. Only learning, you know, in the course of a week, you'd play on Sinatra, you'd do Merle Haggard, you'd play with Stephen Eady or Nat King Cole. It was just fabulous. I loved that, and that really broadened my my whole attitude about music. Because when I left Albuquerque, I lived in Albuquerque, I got all of Django Reinhardt's old stuff, and I was going to be a jazz guitarist. That was it. I was going to play jazz, man. But I realized there wasn't a whole lot of jazz in Albuquerque. And I went to the West Coast to kind of seek that. And I ended up with the Champs on the road. Tequila for 8 months, right.
Did you play on Tequila?
No, I didn't play on. I played on Limbo Rock. I'm glad I never played on another one of those.
Would that be Jack Be Nimble, Jack Be Quick, Jack Go Under Limbo Stick?
Right. Same thing. Billy Strange wrote it. I never got so sick of playing something all my life.
Every limbo boy, get yourself a limbo girl.
Yeah.
Give that chick a limbo world.
Yeah. That was Chubby Checker's record of that. We had
You know, I'm ashamed that I know this.
That shows where your head was.
Oh, man.
But it was a time period. There was some great talent in the group, especially with Jimmy Seals and Dash Cross. Dash was playing drums, and Jimmy was playing sax and fiddle in the Champs.
Yeah.
And they Seals and Cross later, and I was happy to see them do that.
With all this background, and it's so varied, did you ever feel uncomfortable with what became your image? Because after all, when you do something on television, so many people see it, it supersedes everything else. And so people then would pigeonhole. This is what this guy did. He sings songs like By the Time I Get to Phoenix and Wichita Lineman, and he's an affable guy on television, and they didn't know this other stuff about you.
Right. It's sad that music is put in cubby holes, you know. This is country, this is contemporary country, this is conservative country, or pop or rock or whatever. It really is sad. And no, I'm not mad about it. I'm happy to be here, Bob.
Drag me back to yesterday so that I might look into a world that doesn't matter anyhow. You feel it's only fair to make your life an open book, so why not begin the pages with the day, where the stage is set to play in the world of here and now. For here and now.
TV show called Shindig. And this was so strange. I remember it as a kid, in that this was a weird meeting place between, like, the old and the new. The Rolling Stones would be on the show, Chuck Berry would be on the show, and then Zsa Zsa would be on the show, or Mickey Rooney. It was just weird. Do I remember this right?
Yes, definitely.
Put on my high heel sneakers and wear that big hat on my head. I'm pretty sure of one thing. I know I'm really gonna knock them dead.
I'll never forget, the Supremes were on that show. That's where I first met Diana Ross, and oh, what a great gal. But I was going back to the music. You know, like I'd play on every kind of different set. I was a utility singer on the show and guitar player. I'll never forget, I did Kansas City Star one week, and the next Roger Miller's thing. And they dressed me up in a 10-gallon hat and sheepskin clothes. They made everything try to fit. And the next week, I did I'm Alive by the Animals. And I'd do a Sinatra bit, you know. And it was really strange.
I see
Yeah, but I
Eric Burden
loved
and
it.
Roger Miller as pretty much interchangeable myself.
Oh, me too, the Animals. Roger is funny. Roger said I gave him a right arm to be ambidextrous.
Oh, is that his?
Miller.
That's his line?
That's Roger's line.
I've used that myself and tried to pass it off as my own idea, so I know who I can give the credit to. Weren't Billy Preston, yourself, and Leon Russell were sort of like the house band for Shindig?
David Gates played bass on it, too.
It's more widely known that you toured for a while with the Beach Boys, taking Brian Wilson's place, right?
First time Brian got sick, they called me on Thursday and said, Glenn, can you go to Dallas with us Saturday night? I said, and do what? And they said, play bass and sing Brian's part. Now, that was Thursday, and the gig was Saturday. And I said, I don't know the words. They said, well, we'll teach them. We'll teach you. I said, I know the part. I can do the part. That's no problem, because I'd played on the sessions. And I knew most of the songs. You know, instrumentally I knew them. But they wanted me to play bass, and I had played bass before. I'd went on a tour with Rick Nelson in Japan, playing bass and singing harmony with him. And I said, I can handle the bass part, but I didn't realize it was like, you know, patting your head and rubbing your stomach, playing bass and singing the high part, you know. The little old lady from Pasadena, and you're... It was madness. But it worked out great, you know. I just kind of just did the part, you know, and it worked out fine. And maybe within a couple of weeks, I had all the lyrics down pretty well, because it wasn't any of it really too intricate until they did the Pet Sounds album, you know. That's when they started doing the heavy stuff. And it was great, man. I enjoyed it.
Well, she got a daddy's car and she cruised to the hamburger stand now. Great words, ain't they? She forgot all about the library that she told her old man now. And with the radio blasting, she's cruising just as fast as she can now. And she'll have run till her daddy takes her cheapers away.
Did you play on the recording of Good Vibrations? Did somebody tell me that?
Yeah.
You could make a good case that that's the transition record, at least among those that were a big hit. That's the transition for Wilson and for the Beach Boys.
I think so, definitely. That's a great album, Pet Sounds. I played on actually 4 different single records of Good Vibrations. I remember we were down in Gold Star, which is it's not there anymore. Gold Star Recording Studios, when he was putting the... It was all done separate, and some of it was done over at United and Western Recording Studios. And just sitting there playing 12-string rhythm guitar.
Good vibrations.
Though time and time I tried to tell her so, she just didn't know that I would really go.
What do you think happens today if somebody writes a song as good with the same kind of sound as By the Time I Get to Phoenix or Gentle on My Mind, and you recorded it? Is there any place to take it now? Could it become a hit, or is radio too fragmented and people's tastes now too different?
I just think radio's too fragmented. The people's taste hasn't changed. Good songs and good music will be, but it would still be cubbyhole. You know, if you call it, like, I was on the pop charts and the country charts and the MOR charts. At one time, I was looking at Billboard or Cashbox. I had 8 albums in the top 10 in the country charts and 5 albums in the top 10 in the pop charts. And that was because of television. Mm-hmm. And they played me on country, MOR, rock and roll. And I didn't have my first #1 record in all 3 categories until Rhinestone Cowboy.
Which of yours would you say, all right, they want a time capsule. They want me to put 2 or 3 in. Glen Campbell standards, best represent my work. What would you put in?
Oh, I don't know, Rhinestone Cowboy or Southern Nights, Wichita Lineman maybe. Rhinestone Cowboy is my philosophy song. I heard that on the radio and I almost wrecked my car. I mean, it was just, you know, I mean, the sound of the record and everything was, you know, I could tell all the elements were there, but I didn't think it was quite put together. No offense, Larry. Larry Weiss wrote it, and it was his record I heard. But I carried that with me for about a month and a half, 2 months. I was on this tour of Australia. That's all I played was Rhinestone Cowboy. Because there's been a load of compromising on the road to my horizon. Now, this was through the, you know, that would have been from 68 to 74. And more there had. I met with a TV, with managers, with agents, with you name it. And the second verse says, there'll be a load of compromising on the road to my horizon, but I want to be where the light is shining on me. I just thought that just blew me away, you know, and know every crack in the dirty sidewalks of Broadway, which yeah. I did, you know. I think that's a timeless song.
Don't you know there is a load of compromising on this road to my horizon? But you see, I want to be where the light is shining on me. Yeah, like them rhinestone cowboys riding out on a horse in a star-spangled rodeo. Like them rhinestone cowboys getting cards and letters from people I don't even know. Yes, and offers coming over the phone.
What I get from you is a certain confidence, a certain self-assurance as you sit here. You're not striving to be hip. What my guess would be, you figure whoever needs to know knows what you did, yeah, and that had a certain badge of hipness to it. And if most people know the television show, which was popular for different reasons, you're happy with the whole thing.
Yeah, that's true. I did a music show on NBC, which a friend of mine, John Pike, he's the head of Paramount Television now. He was the vice president of NBC, and he was all gung-ho on this music show, right in the middle of it, right in the middle of the second day's shooting. We'd done 3 shows and 3 shows, 30-minute music show, supposed to be Saturday night access, you know. He quit, or he got offered the job at Paramount, and it went right in the tank. So we did 20, maybe 26 shows, and it was aired at, what is prime access, 6:30 to 7?
In the East, yeah.
But anyway, I got more comments on that show because I just got to do any kind of music, and I'd have one guest on. It was a 30-minute show, and but that's there, and people in the business would say, "I like that, Glenn." It's according to who you're talking to, whether it makes any difference or not. To me, like when somebody comes up and I know they know what they're talking about, I say, "Well, thank you." That gives me encouragement.
When you perform now, what's your audience like, age-wise, demographically, and what do they want to hear?
They want to hear Glen Campbell be Glen Campbell and sing what Glen Campbell sings. I have, my stuff is still played on country and the MOR stations, all the easy listening stations, and they expect me to do those, in which I do. I'm so fortunate to have songs that, like Gentle on My Mind. I love to sing Gentle on My Mind. I love to say those words. I love to do By the Time I Get to Phoenix. Jimmy Webb's songs are so melodically great. The melody is so good. The chord progression is so good. And Jimmy Webb, I think, is the best musical poet ever to be born and raised in America.
Where were all those clips from Glen's TV show? Where are all these stories about the Smothers Brothers? What about True Grit? And I say to you, if you can stay up this late tomorrow night, that's when you'll get it, because Glen Campbell will be back. See you later.
With a red dress on, some folks call her Dinah. She stole my heart away from me, went down in Louisiana. Take me back, Tulsa, I'm too young to marry. Take me back, Tulsa, I'm too young to marry.
Thanks for staying up later. Part 2 with Glen Campbell. Last night we covered the 50s and 60s and Glen's background and all the studio sessions he played on with a vast variety of luminaries in the history of rock and roll. A few items we didn't get to, though. What about your own background? What were the circumstances growing up in Arkansas?
On a farm. I saw my first indoor toilet when I was about 9 years old. I thought it was a cased-off spring in the house. It was unusual. On the farm, if you didn't raise it, you didn't eat it. It was really, all Dad bought was like flour and salt and pepper.
Bunch of kids, right?
Yeah, I'm one of 12. I never knew what it felt like to sleep alone until I got married, Bob. There's a lot of truth in that statement.
Oh, that's heavy.
And it was, we weren't poor, actually, but we were, but you didn't know it at the time, because I was very happy. We entertained ourselves playing and singing. Everybody in the family played and sang. And by the time I came along, I think about 7th part was left, so that's probably what trained my ear for singing harmony or bass or whatever. But it was a great life growing up that way. You know, it wasn't fast. You know, if we went anywhere when I was a kid, it was with a wagon and team. I can remember my being in Mama's arms when I was like 2.5, 3 years old. I can remember that. Driving to the all-day singing and dinner on the ground things every May, first May of every year, first Sunday of May every year. They'd have an all-day singing dinner on the ground somewhere. You know, we'd drive the wagon and team 30 miles to do that.
What do you recall floating out of the radio and into young Glen Campbell's ears in those days?
It was whatever would get on the radio. We'd get St. Louis, we'd get the Grand Ole Opry, get that on Saturday night, the local stations, but it was whatever we could get.
It was just a year ago when I first met you. I learned to love you, and I thought you loved me too. Yes, but that's all in the past, and I'll get by somehow. I don't worry, 'cause it makes no difference now. Now that we have really parted, I can't believe we're through. I can't blame myself, and I'm sure I can't blame you. But that's all in the past, and I'll get by somehow. I don't worry, 'cause it makes no difference now.
Grand Ole Opry was all country, and it was mainly bluegrass then. Little Jimmy Dickens, I remember a lot of his early stuff. I liked the guitar work on it. Eddie Arnold. Hank Williams later. Hank While Side Alive. I remember that was one of the biggies I used to do when I was a kid.
And still, when rock and roll became popular, you listened to that, and you heard Sinatra and big band stuff. So even then, your taste, even as a kid, you had eclectic tastes.
Right. Whatever that is. No, it was the big band era. That was definitely, I'm a big fan. Oh, Glenn Miller stuff, boy, I thought that was marvelously constructed. The Four Freshmen, boy, what a sound. That's where Brian Wilson got all of his harmonies from, was same voicing as Glenn Miller's orchestra, only do it with voices.
Last night we talked about Wichita, Lyman, and Galveston, and Gentle on My Mind, by the time I get to Phoenix, and other Glen Campbell hits. Now, the hits preceded the television show. Some of them came after, but you had some hits on the radio, and then what broke it for you as a television star?
The Summer Brothers Smothers Show. Tommy Smothers put together a cast of writers. I'd known Tommy and Dickie. I'd played on one of their albums. Lou Adler produced it, I think. And he said, he saw me on Joey Bishop's late night show. He said, "Can you talk?" I said, "Sure, I'm talking to you." He said, "Can you read cue cards?" I said, "But I'd got too many big words." And,
as long as eclectic isn't on the cue card.
Right. Well, I had to look it up. They had a line I was supposed to say on that show called "Ronald Reagan is a known heterosexual." Well, I had to look it up, right? Anyway, I said, I don't want to say that. And Tommy said, it's okay. Believe me, Glenn, it's all right. Because I'm out of the sticks, Bob. The writers on the show, he put together Steve Martin, Rob Reiner, Mason Williams was one of the head writers, Tommy, Pat Paulson wrote, Lee French, Stiller and Mirror, Jack Burns, Avery Shriver, and Alan Thicke was a writer on the show. All I had to do was come out and say, you know, hi, I'm Glen Campbell, and do what I do. I didn't have to do anything controversial, and I think that's what honed the audience in on Glen Campbell.
It's knowing that your door's always open and your path is free to walk. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Glen Campbell. Yeah. That makes me jingle, leave my sleeping bag, roll up and stash behind your couch.
I was the good old boy out of the show. I wasn't controversial. Lee French did the controversial stuff, or Pat Paulson did the controversial political stuff. But I told Tommy I didn't want to get involved in that.
You specifically you wanted to stay away from it.
I wanted to play and sing and introduce guests.
Did you want to stay away from it because you thought as a career calculation it was a good thing, or just because it wouldn't have been quite right for Glen Campbell? You just didn't feel like that was who you were?
I felt that wasn't who I was. And my dad, you know, always said, Glenn, treat the other fellow like you'd like to be treated, and you'll get along in life. I mean, it was just my upbringing, really, and I'm still that way. Of course, I'll talk about people sometimes. You know, I'm not about that. But it was just, and Tommy, he wrote a show around Glen Campbell. It's like a horseshoe. All I had to do was stand in the middle, and I was covered. As opposed to Dolly Parton's show. They wrote a show and put Dolly Parton in it. That won't work. Later on, when CBS fired Tommy Smothers, which was my producer died, literally, because Tommy was producing the show. He was producing the Glen Campbell Good Time Hour. And they wanted everybody out. They wanted Tommy Smothers out of the Glen Campbell Good Time Hour. Tommy gave me the show. You can have it, Glenn. I mean, not one red cent. And it was really amazing to me. Tommy Smothers is the best television producer I've ever seen.
Who were your favorite guests? You used to get some big names on that show.
John Wayne was, you know, if you got to pull a name out of a hat, John Wayne and Lucille Ball.
How about musical acts that played the show?
Oh, Tom Jones was impressive. Tom Jones was a great singer. Willie Nelson.
Way down in Columbus, Georgia, I want to be back in Tennessee. Way down in Columbus, stockade, friends have turned their backs on me. Go and leave me if you wish to. Never let me cross your mind. In your heart you love another. Leave a little darling, I don't mind. Leave a little darling, I don't mind. Leave a little darling, I don't mind.
It come down that they wanted me to cut out some of the country. In other words, make the show more sophisticated. But I found out it wasn't coming from CBS. It's coming from my ex-manager, you know, who wanted to make me the big time. Don't go out with your guitar. You look too country. Don't do this. Don't do that. I said, but I got to do what I do. I got to do what's real. But anyway, it was a total different ball game, you know, when they started changing the show around.
Love, brother, love, stay proud, love, traveling and salvation show. Hide, hands up the babies and grab the old ladies and everyone goes. I said, love, brother, love, stay proud, love, traveling and salvation show. Hide, catch up the babies and grab the old ladies and everyone knows, brother, love show.
The role in True Grit.
John Wayne's daughter was a big fan of the Good Time Hour. And John Wayne brought her down to the studio to meet Glen Campbell. And you talk about impressed, because I used to pick cotton to get money. It cost a dime to get in the movie at D-Light. Yeah. And to see John Wayne. And it was just a big thrill of my life to meet John Wayne. And John Wayne was instrumental in me getting the part in True Grit.
How much cotton did you have to pick to make a dime?
Oh, it was $1.100, 10 pounds.
10 pounds of cotton.
I could work real hard all day and make maybe 90 cents.
For 8 hours in the field or 10 hours in the field?
Yeah, daylight to dark. For some reason, I'm not a very good cotton picker. I mean, really. And John Wayne was instrumental in doing that, and Hal Wallace. You know, he'd tried Fabian, he tried Frankie Avalon, he'd tried Rick Nelson, and they didn't give him the push that I gave him, you know, because John Wayne had been nominated for an Oscar before, but he hadn't had that push, you know, from a fellow actor to really make him come across enough to win the Oscar.
Finally, it becomes clear to me that we're into sarcasm.
No, I tell people, I said,
I'm a little slow at this hour of the night, but eventually I catch on.
I said, I tell it, it's funny now. I said, I made John Wayne look so good and True Grit, he won his only Oscar, which is probably true. You know, I take myself out of the movie. It was on there a while back. I took myself out of the movie. You know, in other words, that's not me up there. And it was, I enjoyed the movie for the first time, you know, after seeing it 20 times previous.
Yeah. Dennis Hopper was here about a year or so ago, and he told us some great stories about working on that film, including that he was a little intimidated by Wayne and spent a lot of time hiding from him in your trailer.
Yeah, Dennis and I became great friends on that show. And, oh, Robert Duvall, the first day, Hathaway was a hollerer, God rest his soul.
Henry Hathaway, the director.
Yeah, Henry Hathaway, he was a holler and just screamed and hollered at everybody, but it was mainly the extras, people that couldn't talk back or couldn't say anything back. Boy, the first time he screamed at Robert Duvall, I laughed, man, because Duvall was right in his face and called him every name, and some I'd never heard of, and some I couldn't even pronounce. And here they were, it was like a referee and a ball player. It was like you would be fined if you touched the other one, and they were in each other's face, and his spit was coming out, and and Henry dipped snuff or something at that time. I never heard such cussing and arguing in my life. And Duke looked at me, and he said, "The boy's got spunk, don't he?" Talking about Duvall. Duvall and I became great friends, and Henry never yelled at me after that. He'd yell at me, and I'd say, "Hey, I'm here. I've never done this before. Tell me what to do. Don't yell at me what to do." Because that's the first movie I'd ever been in, you know.
I don't understand this conversation at all. She ain't going anyhow. Now, you run along home, little britches. Your mama wants you.
I told her she could go.
No, she'll make nothing but trouble.
Well, maybe I'll just catch this Cheney by myself and take all the money.
You might deliver him, but I would see to it that you didn't collect a thing for it.
Well, how'd you go about that?
I'd dispute your claim. I'd muddy up the water.
You do that and I'll kill you.
I wouldn't count too much on being able to shade somebody I didn't know, fella.
I ain't never seen nobody from Texas I couldn't shade. Lebeef, you get crossways of me and you'll think 1,000 of brick have fell on you.
Afterwards, you were in some that I'm sure you'd like to get a copy of every one and burn, right?
Oh, no, they were fun. You know, I look at them as, well, the Hal Wallace. I had 2 more movies to do with Hal. It was a 5-picture deal, and I did 2. Norwood, I said, "Okay, Hal." I called him Mr. Wallace. I said, "You got 2 more. You got a football player and a guitar player and a singer. Now, who's going to do the acting in this film?" And I said, "You know, it was okay with Duke." And
the football
Joe
player
was still trying to make
Joe
his career
Namath,
acting.
right?
Yeah, Joe Namath. Joe Willie, he's a great guy.
He is a great guy.
Great guy. And well, Kim Darby was in that one too. So but the whole storyline, you know, I just thought when I was reading the script, then I found out the only reason that Hal Wallace could do True Grit was if he did Norwood, which was also written by Charles Portis, who wrote True Grit. Well, I was the guinea pig to do Norwood. You know, a guy wanting to get on the Louisiana hayride with a pet chicken. I just thought, you know, and you ever worked with a chicken?
It's a good premise.
Oh, very good premise, especially, and they want to set the chicken on your guitar neck. You know, like, you got to have a gimmick to do everything. I said, "Where did the chicken come in?" I said, "How the story..."
And what is the chicken's motivation?
None. Crap on the stage, you know, crap on your clothes. That was all she ever done to me. It was just one of those things. I said, "Hal, the stories have to get a little heavier than this, you know. I need something I need something I can get my claws into." And I didn't want to do any more films.
What happens if you're in a hotel room somewhere, you're on the road, playing a concert, you plop down, you flip it on, and on cable or something, there's Norwood, or the cool ones. What does it look like to you now?
They're funny. They're humorous. I laugh at them. But to get to work with Pat Hingle and guys like that, you know, I love to work with the guys, with the character actors. They're so good. Huddleston, David Huddleston, what a great actor. To work with these guys, it was a big thrill. I did Traveling Lady or something like that. I think it was Baby the Rain Must Fall, Steve McQueen. That was my first one in, I guess, early 60s. I was a sideman, you know, and an extra and all that jazz. But I did it, I was a guy in his band. And it was a thrill to be there. But boy, when it got up on the John Wayne level, you know, I realized I was out of my element. I'm a guitar player and singer.
Could you see any technique with Wayne, or was it all just natural?
John Wayne was better in person than he was on screen, I thought. I mean, he was incredible. You could not separate the two. I mean, seeing John Wayne in a movie would be just like you talking to him here on the set.
Yeah.
If you could ever done this with John Wayne, you'd understand what I'm saying. Well, you do anyway. But you couldn't separate the two. Fine, fine human being, boy. I'm telling you, he's one of the all-time great people that I have ever met.
What was it about him as a person that most appealed to you?
He was honest. He was, you know, if he didn't like you, you knew it. If he liked you, you knew it. You always knew where he stood with. You always knew where you stood with him.
Did he make that judgment fast, whether he liked you or didn't like you?
Very fast. I mean, you know, 4 words come out of your mouth. He'd obviously been around long enough. That old song, I've been around enough to know.
Yeah. And if he didn't like you,
I want to go through time.
If he didn't like you, could you get back in his good graces, or was it pretty much a decision set in stone?
It was, well, you had to prove yourself. You had to prove yourself before, you know, he would do it. But I loved him. Boy, I thought he was something. It was amazing. We did, where he's with a gun. I never told this story on TV before. Where he was shooting the rifle with the reins in his mouth. It was a great scene in the movie. He was on the back of the camera truck on a sawhorse, and the reins were tacked to the sawhorse. And the saddle was on it, and everything was tied down. And it was kind of funny. Look, and here's Duke back there. Yeah! With the reins in his mouth on the sawhorse with a close-up. The still man came up. The guy takes a still picture. He goes click, click. And Duke, if it had been bullets in it, it'd have been all the same. He emptied the rifle at him, the pistol, threw him at him, and then got off of the horse with one lung at 8,000 feet up and ran him down and got the camera and tore the film out of it. He called him every name he could make of and said, you know, and it would. That picture would have been on the front of every newspaper in the world. Because it was kind of funny looking. Him sitting on a sawhorse at the back of the camera truck.
Did anybody ever give it back to Wayne? Or was everybody, even a guy like Duvall, did everybody give him a little space?
Everybody gave him space. He never did anything. If he didn't like, I mean, he'd tell you. Hen Hathaway one day said, Glenn, come up on this side of the horse and do this and that and that. And Hathaway didn't realize Duke had the patch on that eye. And then Duke come up and I handed him the rein. He says, don't hand me the rein with that hand. I got a patch on this side of my eye, you know. And I said, Henry told me to do it. And he said, well, Henry don't know a damn thing either. And I said, does that mean I don't? And he said, well, I didn't mean it that way. He was just, he'd tell you instantly. You don't have to wonder where John Wayne stood with you.
Young fella, if you're looking for trouble, I'll accommodate you. Otherwise, leave it alone.
Commercial work you did.
That was fun. Great fun.
Goes back a ways, right?
Yeah. Oh, boy, what was it? Oh, yeah. Is it true blondes have more fun? Then Leon Russell said, look at her go, oh, yeah, look at her go. A lady shining blonde, let's look at clear all blonde. Go clear all. That was Leon Russell and I and a studio guy named Jackie Ward. Made a lot of money off of them commercials. I mean, they were so much fun. That thing ran national for, I don't know, 2 years. Network television.
Look at her go, look at her go, look at her go, little surfer girl. Is it true blondes have more fun?
Why not be a blonde and see?
Is it true blondes have more fun? Blonde, the habit blonde, a lady clear old blonde, surfer girl, and look at shining blonde, surfer girl, a lady clear old blonde, surfer girl, and look at shining blonde.
Where would you like your career to go next? What would you like to do?
Next, I'd just like to keep doing music. I have a contemporary Christian album out now on New Haven Records, which Jimmy Webb wrote a couple of the songs, and it's open. I don't have to aim the music at anybody. I can say what I want to say and do it musically as I want to do it. It's a really total freedom of my musical art form.
As we close this out, if there's anything you'd like to play, a little sample, I'll give you a minute or so and you fire away.
Okay. Let's see. I was going to cut this song. I'm going to do this in November, Lord willing. I bruise you, you bruise me. We both bruise so easily, too easily to let it show. I love you, and that's all I know. All my plans falling through. All my plans depend on you, depend on you to help them grow. I love you, and that's all I know. When the singer's gone, let the song go on.